Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And it sounds like Xbox might possibly be working on an absurdly ambitious exclusive that is inspired by some of the most legendary franchises in the game industry. Yeah, it's sounding real exciting, and we'll talk all about that later on in the video. Now, also on the PlayStation side of things, some of their PlayStation 5 exclusives have been performing very well, and this is a great sign for not just PlayStation, but for the entire game industry, and I'll kind of explain why here in just a bit. As always, though, we do have plenty of things to talk about, so we're actually going to start off today with a story that I find to be incredibly frustrating. Yeah, overall, I'm a pretty optimistic person, but this one kind of grinds my gears a little bit because it sounds like Lost Judgment, the Yakuza spinoff, could be the last in the series. Now, the reason for this is just absurd in my opinion, but reportedly Lost Judgment may be the final game in the Judgment series due to ongoing issues with Sega and the protagonist's talent agency, Johnny and Associates. So the reason for this is because characters in the Yakuza franchise, or in this case, Judgment, they are based off of real people in real life. They do share likeness with their voice actors. And Johnny and Associates apparently has very strict control over the likeness rights of its talents. And because Sega wants Judgment, and therefore Lost Judgment, to head over to the Steam platform, being on PC, Johnny and Associates have stepped in saying they don't want that to happen. And it's not completely clear on as to the reason why, but there's plenty of speculation out there. It might be due to mods that are available on PC. These are real actors and actresses that they use in the Yakuza franchise, and with Talk being a very popular actor over in Japan, and with Johnny and Associates being so strict, they don't want their actor to be viewed in a negative light or in a situation that would be sensitive, to say the least. You know, there can be some pretty raunchy mods out there, and they don't want that to happen to Talk, very possibly. Though, that's all just speculation. At the end of the day, though, it does start to make sense when you really start to think about it, because Sega has really been pushing into the PC platform in the last couple years, and they've been bringing the Yakuza games over to PC. Obviously, Sega wants to bring these games over to PC, but for some reason, Judgment has, to this point, not appeared on the Steam platform. And then when you see a story like this, it starts to kind of make sense. This might be the reason on why we have not seen Judgment appear on Steam as of this point. And really, this whole story is just so unfortunate for so many different reasons. One, fans over on Steam are missing out on a great game. I mean, seriously, I played Judgment HD just a couple months ago, and it's probably one of my favorite games that's released in the last couple years. The story is phenomenal. I love the characters in this game. The gameplay was about what you expect from the Yakuza franchise. And you know what? It just felt like such a natural continuation of the Yakuza franchise with these new and amazingly written characters. Now, though, because of this rumored dispute, it sounds like there's a bit of a question mark on the future of the Judgment series. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to stop making Yakuza games, period, because that's not what's happening here. But the Judgment games in specific, with Talk being the main protagonist, yeah, there's a bit of a question mark here, and I do find that to be very unfortunate. It was just about a month or so ago when they were kind of claiming that the Judgment series would kind of continue on what we saw through Yakuza 1 and 6. And then with Yakuza Like a Dragon, that would kind of become its own series where they would continue on doing turn-based combat. So by all means, it sounded like Judgment was going to continue on even after Lost Judgment. It did sound like they had some big plans for this series, but now there's that big question mark here, and you know what? This is just very unfortunate. If this is true, I really hope that they get this solved and get the problem fixed. Even if they have to change the face model to Talk, which is not really ideal, I would like to see them be able to continue on with the characters and world that they put together here, because I think that they're on to yet another very special series here with Judgment. Next up, we got an interesting turn of events for Final Fantasy. No, not the upcoming Final Fantasy 16 or even that Final Fantasy Origins game, but here we have Final Fantasy 14, the MMO, and apparently it's now become so popular that it is completely sold out of not just physical copies, but it's completely sold out of digital copies as well. Yeah, I've been following the game industry for a while now, and I'm not sure I've heard of anything like this before, but Final Fantasy XIV has become so popular here recently that they just stopped selling this game digitally completely. It's actually crazy when you think about it, but what's happening here is that I think because the servers have just become so overloaded here recently, that Square Enix went ahead and decided to just halt sales for the time being. Yeah, I think they might want to go ahead and revamp their servers moving forward with this amount of success. But that really is the question. Why all of a sudden is Final Fantasy XIV having this much success? And from what I've been reading, it seems like it's linked to two different situations. One being the state of World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft has been this massive MMO for such a long time with this very large following. But from what I've been reading, Blizzard has not been doing a great job with World of Warcraft from some time, and with their most recent update, it's left a lot of fans very unhappy, and more importantly, it also left a few big influencers very unhappy. So I guess a couple big influencers decided to go ahead and leave World of Warcraft and move over to Final Fantasy XIV, and with that, a large part of the community left World of Warcraft and has now moved over to Final Fantasy XIV. Now, on one side, this is just absolutely fantastic for Final Fantasy XIV, especially ahead of that Endwalker expansion that releases on November later this year. On the other side of things, though, this is really bad for World of Warcraft and then Blizzard. Now, Blizzard has nobody to blame but themselves in this situation from what it looks like. But I mean, we've been talking about this for years and years. There's always been those Halo killers, and there's always been those WoW killers. Well, it looks like Final Fantasy XIV might just be that WoW killer after all, or maybe it was just Blizzard all along. Either way, big congrats to Square Enix and Final Fantasy XIV. There's been a lot of praise for Final Fantasy XIV in the last couple years, especially with their story-related content, but yes, big congrats to Final Fantasy XIV for this just massive amount of success here recently. Moving on, let's talk about that big Xbox exclusive. So earlier this year, there was this leak going around that IO Interactive, the Hitman developer, was working on some kind of Xbox exclusive codenamed Project Dragon. And this was coming from some pretty big insiders, Jez being one of them. And over on the Xbox 2 podcast with Randall Thor and Jez, they were having a bit of a conversation about different acquisitions from Xbox and the possibility of them happening. And IO Interactive popped up, and even though there was really no information on any kind of Xbox acquisition moving forward, I did find it very interesting what Jez had to say about Project Dragon. So according to Jez, he has a lot of documentation on this IO Interactive Project Dragon game. So it does look like this is a very real thing. But interestingly enough, he says that this game is inspired by World of Warcraft, which we just talked about, and then Diablo. Now, both of those are very different games. One's an MMO, while the other is a dungeon crawler. But these are some of the most legendary PC franchises to date. Really, these are some of the most legendary franchises in the game industry as a whole. So being inspired by these two specific games is very interesting. But he goes a little bit further than that. He also says that this is an absurdly ambitious game that could possibly be a 10-year MMO or even possibly a connected multiplayer fantasy game with procedurally generated dungeon tech, which is being made in partnership with Microsoft. Yes, so there's quite a bit to go over here, but the first thing that's really going to stand out is him saying that this will be a 10-year type of game, though he doesn't really seem to know if this will be an MMO type of game or if it'll be a connected style experience, something more similar to Diablo or something completely different. There's plenty of ways that you can kind of do a connected world, whether that be something like the Destiny franchise with a shared world, or if you just kind of want to go the full MMO route. We're just going to have to kind of wait to see in that regard. But I think what we can kind of gather here is that it will be some kind of fantasy game developed by IO Interactive, which is the Hitman developer, and it will have some kind of multiplayer aspect to it with some procedurally generated dungeons. So I think that is quite a bit of information to go over here, and it certainly sounds interesting to say the least. He does say that this is an absurdly ambitious game, and with IO Interactive out of all developers working on it, which has done a fantastic job with Hitman, yeah, I'll be very excited to see what exactly this game is. Now, do keep in mind that this game is still early in development, so it'll probably be a few years before we officially hear about it, but I still think that's plenty of information to go off of, at least early on. Now, speaking of Jez Corden, he had something else really interesting to say over on the Xbox 2 podcast, and that's a document that he apparently had seen that suggests that Warner Brothers might look into selling NetherRealm and TT Games. Now, obviously, AT&T and Discovery are now merging, so there has been a lot of questions about the Warner Brothers game studios, and in fact, they've already sold off a mobile studio, but so far they haven't sold off any of their bigger studios. NetherRealms and TT Games are obviously very big studios. NetherRealms works on the Mortal Kombat franchise, which is easily one of the biggest fighting game franchises in history, and then you also have TT Games, which works on the LEGO games. The LEGO games have been very successful in the past, so if they sold off those two studios, that would be a big acquisition for whoever would claim them. Now, we don't know if anybody's actually going to grab any of these studios or not, but that's actually where things get a little bit more interesting, because Warner Brothers actually responded to this rumor by saying, I can confirm NetherRealm Studios and TT Games will continue to remain a part of Warner Brothers Games, and all are included in the Warner Media Discovery merger. So here you have Jez Corden claiming that he had seen a document that maybe they would sell off these studios, and then you have Warner Brothers themselves saying, no, that's not going to happen. And I'm just going to say it. I know there's going to be a lot of rumors surrounding the acquisition of these Warner Brothers studios, but I do trust Jez Corden here. I do think that he probably did see something, or else he wouldn't have reported on it. He's a pretty reliable journalist over on Windows Central, and I don't think that he's just making that up. But at the same time, things always change, and here we do have Warner Brothers publicly saying they are not looking to sell NetherRealm or TT Games. Whether you believe that or not is completely up to you, but we do have Warner Brothers publicly stating that they are not looking to sell either NetherRealms or TT Games. Moving on, let's talk about the PlayStation 5, or more specifically, let's talk about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Now, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is one of the first big PlayStation 5 exclusives that launched last month, and since it released, it's had quite a bit of success on the PlayStation 5. According to the GFK Top 10 for the week ending July 10th, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart has now claimed the #1 spot 3 times since its initial release on June 11th, which is already very impressive. But here we're actually seeing a 187% jump in sales from last week due to another PlayStation 5 restock. And this is something that we're going to kind of see with these PlayStation 5 exclusives. Anytime we see a PS5 restock, we're also going to see a lot of these PlayStation 5 exclusive games surge in sales, because people don't just buy new consoles, but they also buy games with their console. This is also a great sign that actual customers are getting their hands on the PlayStation 5, and it's not just all going to scalpers. Scalpers still suck. We can talk about that over and over again, but it does look like here that actual customers are getting their hands on a PlayStation 5, so that is great news all on its own. But something that really excites me about Ratchet & Clank just being so successful is the type of game it is. First off, Rift Apart is an excellent game, and it's the reason that I went ahead and platinumed this game. I don't usually do that in games, but I like this one so much I went ahead and did that. But also, the type of game Ratchet & Clank is what really excites me. We've kind of seen the game industry move away from these type of cartoony mascot type of games. Obviously, Nintendo continues to make these type of games, and they have a ton of success with them, but it's really good seeing PlayStation have success with a game like this. Not only is that great news for the future of Ratchet & Clank, but maybe it could convince them to bring back some of their other mascot-related games, such as Jak and Daxter, or possibly Sly Cooper. Now, obviously, fans have been asking for a Jak 4 for what feels like an eternity, and with the success that we're seeing here with Ratchet and Clank, maybe now is the time to bring a franchise like this back. They are very similar in many ways, with Jak also having a heavy focus on action-based combat. But, I don't think we should just stop there. Xbox, let's also pay attention, and now I know Banjo-Kazooie is a very different game, but I'm just going to go ahead and make the excuse to bring it up anyways. Xbox, let's look at these Ratchet and Clank sales and say, hey, let's bring back Banjo-Kazooie and see what happens. That's all I'm asking for. Just see what happens. But I'm sure I'll be asking for a new Banjo-Kazooie game 10 years from now, and I probably still won't have gotten my wish, but I'm going to just cling on to hope here. But regardless, I am really happy to see Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart have so much success, and I'm looking forward to more Ratchet & Clank games in the future, and I'm sure we will get more with all the success Rift Apart has had. And on to the poll of the day. Rumor has it that Xbox might be looking to drop Xbox Live Gold. Now, we talked about this last Friday, but I wanted to ask you all, do you all actually think that Xbox will remove Xbox Live Gold or not? And interestingly enough, 71% of you said yes, you do think Xbox will drop Xbox Live Gold. And it seems like several of you all do think when Xbox Game Pass does reach a specific milestone that they will go ahead and decide to remove Xbox Live Gold. And you know what, really, I don't know if that will happen, but I do hope it does. I think Xbox Live Gold is a bit of an archaic service by this point, especially with them supporting PC games where you can play multiplayer completely free. Meanwhile, on the Xbox side of things, you have to pay for multiplayer. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense on why the PC side of things is treated differently than consoles. I mean, console gamers are a little bit more used to paying for online. We've been doing it for such a long time, whereas PC, it's always been free with things like Steam. But at the same time, it just doesn't sit right with a lot of gamers, and it just makes Xbox Live Gold, especially with games with gold, not having a lot of great free monthly games. It just kind of taints Xbox Live Gold a little bit. The big question I have is, when you have an established subscription service like this, will they be willing to actually say goodbye to all that money? That's the big question I have right now. Now, I think they absolutely want this to happen, but it's just a matter of finding a way to migrate Xbox Live Gold subscriptions into Xbox Game Pass. How do they do that? That's the ongoing question, and how they actually get all of these Xbox Live Gold subscribers to migrate over to Xbox Game Pass. Right now, that is happening with Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, though I think they're going to have to find another way to get Xbox Live Gold subscribers over to just Xbox Game Pass. So we'll see what happens with all this, but I do remain very hopeful, and I do think that they're trying to find a solution in making this happen. Now we just have to wait and hope they find a good solution to make that happen. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.